And we're back, boys and girls, ladies and
Welcome in.
gents, children of all ages. Back Fantasy Football Mafia. It's the comeback kid. It's Choking B. He spelled his name wrong again. And your boy JoJo. We are in this mindset of
Football.
things we learned. I can't come up with the adjective, but like we're in that mindset of just kind of reflection. And just really want to know or give you guys what we've kind of uncovered as far as what we've learned in this past fantasy football season, and give you guys some things to think about as you guys are prepping for the next season. Early on, take these notes, archive this video for later because we'll probably reference it when we get back into draft season. But how you guys been?
Fantastic since our last episode, which was 20 minutes ago. Pretty good.
Brian, what's going on?
Doing great. Fantastic.
I can feel the energy just coming from you right now.
I totally believe
Oreos.
Yes.
Anyways, we'll get right into it. We're going to go again just one by one of the fantasy things that we've learned and just give you guys some insight, and we'll have some back and forth, of course. Feel free to put in the comments, too, what you guys have learned in the fantasy football season. We can interact with you that way. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe and follow our IG and our Twitter handle. Go ahead. Actually, Brian, you're going to kick us off this time. Go ahead, Ben.
Well, what I've learned this past year is that I'm a better fantasy player than both you guys.
Oh, God. I knew that was – you know what? I knew
Actually,
that was
I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. It's not something I learned. I've already been knowing that. But anyways, I'm going to go with the rookies matter. Rookies matter. You look at Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Najee Harris. These are guys that all finished like in the top 10 in their position. Kyle Pitts, they finished like in the top 4 at his position. Amon St. Brown, later end toward the season, came on hot. Ron, what was his name?
Amon-Ra.
So basically came in super hot toward the end of the season. I think he was only behind like Cooper Kupp at that point. So don't be afraid to draft rookies, even though there's no history behind them. Showing, since last year that rookies can play right away.
Yeah,
so don't be afraid to draft a rookie.
Yeah, a little back and forth here on that. Not everyone. I mean, these past two. Let's just put it this way: these last 2 seasons, we've had a wide receiver that just completely disrupt like any analytics or any projection model that any of these fantasy experts claim to have. Like, no one expected Jay Jeff to do what he did his rookie year, and obviously he did it again. He was like wide receiver 2 or 3 or 4, whatever. He was top 5 again this year, and then obviously Jamar Chase did what he did this year. Even almost outproduced his running mate, former college running mate. Not everyone's gonna. This is not going to happen every single season. Although I am high on a couple wide receivers in this rookie class, but still, like the match has got to fit, the system's got to fit, and opportunity, of course, is the biggest thing. Opportunity has to be there. But what do you say to like? Are people going to get too hung up on like who's the rookie that's going to break out like Chase and Justin Jefferson did? Do you think that's going to be like biting anybody soon?
I don't know if there's particularly a wide receiver I can think of heading this draft that might be kind of like them. I would, if I was to do the draft right now, I would probably look at like of course this is once the draft ends, but look at the guys who goes on those offenses or on those teams that are really bad, always plays from behind, like a Brown, who they always have to throw. So look for those rookies that they draft to be that number 1 guy, that has a bad defense, always playing from behind. So look out for those type of guys.
Yeah, so opportunity and volume definitely dictate that fantasy production. Yeah, there's a lot of good names out there. I'll just tease a couple names that what I've been obviously following and reading about is obviously the 2 wide receivers out of Ohio State, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, but I'm even higher than even someone that ranked higher than them would be like Drake London out of SC, Treylon Burks out of Arkansas, Jahan Dotson out of Penn State, to name a few. So just pay attention to some. This rookie class is pretty damn potent and explosive. So there could be another big name, but again, temper your expectations. Joseph, do you want to go next, or you want me to go?
I can go.
Go ahead, man.
It's cool. So mine is what I learned is don't buy into the hype of getting a running back super early. If you look at the top 5 running backs that were drafted last year, McCaffrey, Kamara, Cook, Elliott. I mean, all these guys were kind of underperformed, or they would get injured. They're on and off the field. Barkley's another one. So if you look going into longer in the season as well, a lot of running backs do get hurt, unfortunately. So you can always pick one up from free agency to fill in. And I felt like I was doing that throughout the year, even though I went running backs early. I mean, I drafted Clyde Edwards. Oh, not Clyde Edwards. Edwards from the Ravens. He got injured right in the offseason. And I drafted Elliott. I traded him because he sucked so bad. And I ended up having a totally different team at the end of the year. So even though I felt like getting running backs early would help me build a solid team where I don't have to worry about it, it was totally the opposite. So I feel like you should get a tight end, a really good tight end, some good wide receivers, a very good quarterback, build around that, and then later on get some running backs that you can use in the meantime, and then just wait for the others to fall and then pick up a starting running back later on. I think this is the strategy we should look to going into seasons to follow. It might not always end up this way, or a lot of running backs end up underperforming the first round running backs, but I think we're seeing a trend within the last couple of years where that has happened. So definitely for me, I know I'm not going to be looking. I'll probably be letting my strategy out too soon here, but I'm not really going to be looking to draft a running back in the first round. But of course, it's depending on
what happens if you have like a top 3 pick.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It depends on the pick.
I was gonna go back to that, but go ahead, Brian. Go expand more on that because that's exactly where I was gonna ask. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you got a top 3 pick, you're kind of forced. I was picking later in the first round last year, so I was like, I'm gonna pick the top player at a different position. That's where I went. So it really depends on where you're picking. If you're picking mid to late first round, I would go with no running backs. But if you're high up there, you're kind of forced to.
The draft board always dictates what like you have. Like you have a plan. You always have like somewhat of a plan that what you want, or you have like your list of like players I want. Right? Everybody wants to draft the players they like. So of course we're not telling you to go off the rails on just like don't ignore that list. But you also got to be strategic in the way the draft is kind of dictating and how you should pick, because the value is there. You're not going to try to pick a running back. What do you call it? Like just a middle to late second round running back in the first round because the running backs went, you need a running back. You don't want to do that. You want to load up on maybe the first or second best receiver and just kind of go that route. And so that sometimes dictates in that, what do you call it, mid to late first round, like Brian was just saying. So, but yeah, there's a lot of value there. Zero running back strategy. Usually that means in the first 3 rounds, but it could mean even later, just depending on how the draft board kind of falls.
Yeah, and going into next year, I feel like only 3 running backs I would get above everyone else. So it's like the top 3 picks: McCaffrey, Henry, and Taylor. Everyone else, I think you could wait as far as running backs. I would get Kupp at 4. I mean, that's just me right now. It could change.
I don't know what to call this particular thing I've learned, but I guess you could just say wait on QB. And I know there's a lot of fantasy like articles that you can read out there that probably deploy the same type of advice. But just like the ones that kind of were on the winning rosters weren't usually the top picks. Like I had Pat Mahomes in a couple leagues. He wasn't in the championship, or a lot of championship rosters. The one I would say that probably the most would probably have been Josh Allen, as far as the top ranked QBs ADP wise in the beginning of the year and late, because he just crushed throughout the whole year. Aaron Rodgers probably maybe on some, but the guys like Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Pat Mahomes, Dak, like they probably weren't on those winning rosters towards the end of the year. The guys that were, Joe Burrow, guys like Jalen Hurts, guys like obviously Justin Herbert, those kind of players that were drafted probably like in that there were eight or later ADP wise as far as the quarterback position. Of course, my colleague Brian in our pre-show was just saying like he probably would also want to take a surefire QB early, because you're locking into that maybe top 4, top 5 guy. Kyler Murray, even though he was out middle of the year, he still came on. He still had great weeks when he was playing. He finished as the 4th scoring QB in most leagues, or scoring formats, I should say. But he tailed off towards the end of the year as far as fantasy football playoffs are concerned. And of course, like Pat Mahomes always disappoints at the end of the year. I have him in a dynasty league, and I'm always like second. I finished second 3 of the last 4 years, because he doesn't fully go in the last couple of weeks. He just doesn't give it all for whatever reason. So my advice with this is kind of load up on wide receiver and running backs, and kind of use the positions like QB and tight end, and kind of go late, because there's a lot of value and a lot of EV out there, expected value, to be had, as far as your fantasy season winding down, with these players that just have a lot of opportunity and playing for a lot towards the end of the year. So fade QB and tight end until late, and load up on those skill position players. Any advice? Are you like?
Yeah, I mean, if you look like the past few seasons, quarterbacks you drafted in probably the 9th or 10th round ended up being steals that help you get into the championship. Like this year was probably Jalen Hurts or Tom Brady, Justin Herbert,
and Joe Burrow.
Before that,
you could have had. I think you could have had you could have drafted back-to-back rounds, because Burrow was like in the 90s, and same with Hurts. Like he was in the 80s, 90s range. So you could have even like went Hurts, Burrow as your two quarterbacks late, and you could have had like 7 to 8 skill position players before them. Imagine that roster.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And then before that, even Josh Allen, the year before that, he was drafted in like the 10th round. I remember I got him in the 10th round, and he helped me win the championship. So,
exactly. Like think about this too, because where Jamar Chase went and where Cooper Kupp went, Deebo Samuel, you could have had all those guys and still had Joe Burrow and Jalen Hurts if you had the perfect nuts draft. Of course, maybe you get like Jonathan Taylor or Derrick Henry early. Like you could have had the nuts draft, because all those were in different rounds. And as far as ADP was concerned, so it could have been a smash hit for. I'm sure one viewer out there had that kind of a draft. It would have been nuts to see that.
Probably.
Yeah. I have a little bonus one here, because I've always on these special teams positions. I want them out. I want like a hashtag going here, guys. I'm gonna probably post it on our Twitter. Put it in the comments section. Is just hashtag get defenses and kickers out of fantasy football. That's a long one. I'll have to shorten it up, but I don't want them in there anymore. It's so pointless. Do you guys have any gripes on special teams positions for fantasy football?
I like them. It makes it more interesting.
Was that why you guys both talk at the same time? Go ahead.
No, defenses I'll keep. I'll kick kickers out. But defenses, special teams, they can score a touchdown. I feel like it's a key picking good defense. I feel like it's a fun part of the game. Kickers I don't like, though.
Okay.
I have a feeling you guys have lost some games because of kickers. That's why you want to kick them out. But I like kickers. I like picking kickers. I like analyzing kickers. They're a fun part of the game too.
You know what?
Are they going to kick?
I will say I've enjoyed our boom boom kicker of the week segment, like when we were in the middle of the season. So Brian, like if fantasy football in our leagues they don't change, we're having kickers, we'll obviously keep that segment. Even if we don't, I think it's a fun segment to do for a lot of leagues that probably still deploy kickers out for fantasy football. I'm not opposed to that, but I will say I'll throw out some stats real quick before we sign off here. Was that the number one kicker for the most of the year? I'm not sure if he did, because again I don't pay attention to the kickers that much, but I think it was Nick Folk, right, off the Patriots. So his average was around 10.3 points per game. The number 12 kicker, Greg the Leg Zuerlein, 8.7. Just a mere 2 points pretty much separating the pair. But towards the end of the year, weeks 15 to 17, he posted a 5, a 3, and a 9, right? Which didn't help you much at the end of the year. So, and then obviously you had he had some games of 16 and 21, but there's just so much disparity between those kind of outputs week to week that is just, why even have them? Of course, skill positions can do the same thing. They can get COVID, they can get hurt, they give you zeros, right? But on a game-to-game basis, the projections and the predictability of those positions are a lot easier to predict and give advice for rather than kickers. Things can get even nuttier on the defensive end. The number one defense in the fantasy football season was the Cowboys, which was, again, I don't know how many people had them even in the top 10 defense, because after what they were the quote-unquote fantasy carnival for the last season before that, historically low. But weeks 13 to 16, Dallas scored 17, 22, 16, and 24 points, which likely carried a lot of people to fantasy football stardom. But the Cowboys put up 1 point in week 17. 1 point. Again, after all those great weeks, 1 point in week 17. 8 teams scored more than 12 in that final week. So you could have streamed that defense in that final week. I like to stream defenses. I don't know how much you guys like to do that. You guys can give some God, I can't think of the word right now, but some advice, I guess, on this kind of strategy or this type of insight. But go ahead.
I'll stream defenses, but it was a great defense. I'm more likely to keep going with them. But yeah, always
with these rookie quarterbacks, right? You can stream defense against rookie quarterbacks. That's a common thing to do. That doesn't take a lot of predictability. Of course, you can get burned, but the likelihood of that happening and working out for you is a lot higher, I think, as far as matchups concerned. Go ahead and continue.
Yeah, no, but no, defenses I'll still keep. Kickers I'm not the biggest fan of. I think Yosef wants to keep the kickers in because he fucking looks like he was a kicker in high school. But yeah,
he was left hand.
I'm a pretty good kicker, not gonna lie. But yeah, I like the streaming defenses. The only thing that's kind of annoying is that you have to look through the waiver wire every week, and sometimes you have to use your fab. It's like I just want a good defense I can just play every week and be confident in. So that's the only thing. Well, I'll still keep it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm a big DFS guy too, and obviously, kickers are no longer in DFS, so I'm kind of done away with them for the most part. But obviously, defenses are still in there, so there's a lot to be had there. But till next year, and maybe until rules change, maybe common rules on these platforms, the popular platforms that we play fantasy football on, we'll see what they decide because they kind of dictate the rosters that we play. Any final words, gentlemen? We're gonna sign off.
Stay tuned for the Combine episode coming up next.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, or we'll come after you. Peace out.
Our mascot, Brian, anything else to say?
I'm hungry. All right, just go.
Eat some food and peace.